Snow fell heavily outside, covering the land like a white sheet. The wind howled, rattling the windows of the small wooden cabin. Inside, Ethan sat near the fireplace, reading an old book. The fire crackled softly, but the cold still pushed against the walls, finding its way into every corner. He took a sip of hot tea, thinking it would be another quiet night. Then a sound came from the back of the cabin. It was faint at first, like a soft scratching. He frowned, putting his cup down. There it was again, scraping against the back door, slow but desperate. Ethan stood up, his hand automatically going to the hunting knife hanging on the wall. He moved quietly, each step slow, listening carefully. The scratching turned into a weak thump, as if someone was leaning against the door. Ethan's heart began to beat faster. Few people came out here, especially in weather like this. He reached the door and pressed his ear against it. A soft, trembling voice whispered something he couldn't understand at first. He unlatched the lock and slowly opened the door. The freezing wind rushed in, biting his skin. On the snowy ground, half collapsed, was a woman. No, she was not human. Her skin had a faint silver tone, glowing slightly under the moonlight. Her hair, long and tangled, was covered with frost. She shivered violently, her lips pale, her breath shaky. She tried to speak again, and this time, Ethan heard her words clearly. "I can cook, bear your children. Just don't throw me out." Ethan froze, unsure if he had heard correctly. Her voice was weak, almost breaking. She looked at him with wide, glowing eyes, full of fear and desperation. Snowflakes clung to her eyelashes. She was dressed in thin, torn clothes, nothing suited for this weather. Without thinking, Ethan reached forward and pulled her inside. She stumbled, her legs nearly giving out, and he caught her before she hit the floor. She was freezing to the touch, her skin cold like ice. He shut the door quickly to block the wind and dragged her closer to the fire. He wrapped her in a thick blanket from the couch. She sat there trembling, trying to warm her hands by the flames. Ethan crouched in front of her, studying her face. She looked young, but there was something unusual about her, besides the silver skin and faintly glowing eyes. "What did you say just now?" he asked. Her eyes darted to the door, as if she expected it to burst open at any second. "Please. I have nowhere else to go. I can cook, I can clean, I can give you children. Just don't make me leave." Ethan blinked. "Why would I throw you out in this storm?" She didn't answer. Her hands shook as she pulled the blanket tighter around herself. She was watching the fire like she was afraid it would disappear. He could tell she was exhausted, her breathing uneven, her lips trembling from both cold and fear. "Who are you?" Ethan asked again. She hesitated. "Lyra," she whispered finally. I can't go back outside. They'll find me." "Who?" Ethan asked, leaning closer, her head lowered. "The ones who owned me." A chill ran down Ethan's spine. The words were spoken so softly, but they carried a heavy weight. He didn't know what she meant, but he knew enough to realize she was in trouble. He glanced toward the window. The snow outside was thick, the world beyond the glass white and silent. But he suddenly felt they weren't alone in the night. "Why here?" he asked. She looked at him again, and her lips parted slightly. "Because humans sometimes protect the weak." The wind howled louder, making the cabin's walls creak. Ethan stood and went to check the door again, making sure it was locked. Something about her voice, about her eyes, told him this wasn't a random meeting. Behind him, she pulled the blanket tighter, as if trying to disappear into it. Her eyes stayed fixed on the door, every sound outside making her flinch. Ethan thought about the strange way she had appeared, the words she had spoken, the fear in her face. The firelight flickered, casting moving shadows on the walls. Ethan felt a strange unease, a sense that danger was close. He didn't know if bringing her in was a good choice or a mistake. She might be telling the truth, or she might be leading trouble straight to his door. Then, from far away, a faint crunching sound came from outside, footsteps in the snow. Not just one pair, several. Slow, deliberate, drawing closer. Lyra's head snapped toward the sound. Her hands gripped the blanket tightly, her glowing eyes wide with terror. "They've found me," she whispered. Ethan's hand went to the hunting knife again, his heartbeat loud in his ears. He stepped to the window, pulling the curtain back just a little. Through the white haze of snow, he saw 3 tall shapes moving between the trees. They were getting closer. Ethan turned to her. "Who are they?" Her lips trembled. "If they come in, you'll never see me again." The shapes in the snow stopped. The night seemed to hold its breath. Then the sound of heavy boots on his porch. A knock came, slow, hard, and final. Ethan stood frozen, his breath visible in the cold air. Lyra's eyes locked on his, silently begging him not to open the door. The knock came again, louder this time, echoing through the small cabin. Ethan's hand hovered over the lock. He didn't know what waited on the other side, but he knew one thing. His quiet life was over. Ethan's fingers tightened on the lock, but he didn't move it. The knocking stopped, replaced by the sound of the wind pushing snow against the walls. Lyra's breathing was fast, her blanket pulled so high it almost covered her face. He stepped back from the door slowly and whispered, "Stay quiet." He went to the fire, grabbed the poker, and stirred the burning logs. The room grew warmer, but the cold in the air felt thicker, heavier. He could sense eyes outside. The crunching of snow started again, moving away from the door and circling the cabin. Lyra's eyes followed every sound. She sat upright now, her posture tense, as if ready to run. Ethan poured hot water into a small pot, added dried vegetables, and let it boil. The smell of soup filled the air, but neither of them was hungry. Finally, when the noises faded into the distance, Ethan set a bowl in front of her. "Eat." She took it with shaking hands, sipping slowly. The warmth seemed to bring some color back to her silver skin. She didn't look up as she spoke. "I know you have questions, but if I answer them, you may throw me out before I finish." Ethan leaned back in his chair, watching her carefully. "Then try me." Her lips pressed together before she said, "I escaped from a place where I was owned. A contract said I belonged to a man I never chose. I ran. If they find me, they will take me back." Ethan frowned. "Why come here?" Her eyes lifted, meeting his. "I heard humans sometimes protect those who can't protect themselves. I thought maybe you would?" He didn't answer right away. The fire cracked, and the wind hissed outside. She looked down again, taking another sip of soup. The sound returned, footsteps in the snow. This time, they were slower, heavier, deliberate. Ethan stood and moved toward the window, peeking through the curtain. 3 tall figures approached through the storm. They were not human. Their bodies were covered in dark armor, and their eyes glowed faint red through narrow visors. Lyra froze. Her bowl slipped from her fingers, spilling soup on the floor. She looked at him with pure terror. "Please, don't open the door." Ethan's instincts screamed at him to grab his rifle. Instead, he walked toward the door and waited. The knock came again, louder this time, 3 hard hits that shook the frame. A deep voice called out, muffled through the wood. "We know she is inside. Hand her over, human." Ethan kept his voice calm. "No one's here but me." The voice on the other side chuckled. "Do you think we can't see her heat through the walls? Step aside." Ethan gripped the handle tighter. "This is my home. You're not welcome inside." Another voice joined in, colder and sharper. "She belongs to us. She is property." Lyra was trembling so hard she could barely stand. She hid behind the couch, eyes darting between Ethan and the door. Her breathing was quick, almost gasping. A heavy thud hit the door, making the wood groan. "We will search your home," the first voice said. Ethan's hand went to the hunting knife hanging by the doorframe. His pulse thudded in his ears. He unlocked the door just enough to open it a crack. Snow whipped in, and the wind roared around the figures outside. The closest alien leaned forward, its helmet inches from Ethan's face. "Move." Ethan didn't move. "Not without a warrant, soap, or whatever you people use." The alien's head tilted. "We use force." Lyra made a sound, half whimper, half warning. But Ethan didn't step aside. He knew they could break him in a second, but something inside him refused to let them take her. One of the other figures shifted, placing a heavy, clawed hand on the door. Ethan saw sharp ridges of armor, steam rising from their breath in the freezing air. The leader leaned closer. "You have until I count to 3. Then I come in." Ethan gripped the knife behind the door, hidden from sight. His muscles tightened. He didn't know how this would end, but he knew he would not hand her over. 1. The voice was low and deadly. 2. A heavy boot pressed against the edge of the door. Before 3 could come, Lyra's voice rang out from behind Ethan. "Stop!" The aliens froze. Her tone was sharp, almost commanding. She stepped into view, her blanket falling to the floor, her glowing eyes locked on the leader. She spoke in a language Ethan didn't understand, sharp, fast words that seemed to cut through the storm itself. The leader stiffened, his visor tilted slightly downward, as if unwilling to meet her eyes. The other two shifted uncomfortably. She took one slow step forward. More words came from her lips, colder this time. The leader's body language changed, anger replaced by caution. He turned his head slightly to his companions. Without another word, they stepped back into the snow. The leader pointed at Ethan. "This is not over. We will return." They turned and vanished into the storm. Their shapes faded behind the curtain of snow until only the wind remained. Ethan shut the door and locked it, his hands still shaking. He turned to her. "What did you say to them?" Her eyes met his, but she didn't smile. "Enough to make them wait. Not enough to make them stop." Ethan's gaze stayed on the door, his mind racing. Whatever she had told them, it had bought them time. But time for what, he didn't know. She bent down, picking up the blanket. They will be back. And next time, they won't knock. The fire popped loudly, the only sound in the room. Ethan realized he had just made himself part of something dangerous, something that would not end easily. The storm outside raged through the night, but Ethan barely slept. Every creak of the wooden walls, every gust of wind against the cabin made him open his eyes and reach for his knife. Lyra sat by the fire, wrapped in the blanket, staring into the flames without blinking. She didn't speak, and neither did he. By morning, the wind had softened, but the snow outside was piled high. The world looked calm, but Ethan knew it was a lie. Danger didn't always make noise. He stepped outside with his rifle, pretending to check the woodpile, but his eyes scanned the tree line. No movement, no tracks. Still, his gut told him they were out there. Inside, Lyra was already busy in the small kitchen. The smell of something warm filled the air. She moved with quiet skill, chopping vegetables, heating broth, her hands working like she'd done it 1,000 times before. Ethan leaned against the counter, watching her. "You've cooked human food before," he said. She glanced at him but didn't answer. He crossed his arms. "You know, if you expect me to risk my life for you, you could tell me the truth." Her hands slowed on the knife. "The truth will not make you safer," she said softly. Before he could reply, a sound cut through the silence, a low, mechanical hum in the distance. Ethan froze. Lyra's eyes went wide. They both moved to the window. Through the blur of falling snow, 3 dark shapes emerged. It was the same armored aliens from last night, walking slowly toward the cabin. Lyra gripped his arm, her fingers cold even through his sleeve. "Don't talk to them. Don't let them in." Ethan's jaw tightened. "If I don't talk, they'll just break the door." The humming grew louder. The aliens stopped just outside the cabin. One raised a hand and knocked, each hit sending a dull vibration through the wood. Ethan walked to the door, his rifle in hand. "Who are you?" he called. The leader's voice came back, deep and calm. "We already told you. We've come for what belongs to us, the female you hide." Ethan glanced at Lyra. She was pale, her lips pressed tight, her eyes begging him to deny it. "You're wrong," Ethan said. "No one's here but me." The leader's tone sharpened. "Your walls are thin. We can smell her fear." Lyra's grip on his arm tightened. He felt the tremble in her hands. He wanted to tell her to hide, but there was nowhere safe in the cabin. The leader's voice grew colder. "Step aside, human. We will search." Ethan tightened his hold on the rifle. "You're not searching anything without my say-so." The alien's visor tilted toward him. "Then your say-so ends now." Before Ethan could react, the leader pushed the door open just enough to step inside. Snow blew in, scattering across the floor. The other 2 aliens followed, their armored feet heavy on the wood. Lyra gasped and took a step back, but the leader's head turned toward her instantly. "There," he said. Ethan stepped between them. "You're trespassing." The leader ignored him, pulling a thin metallic tablet from his belt. He tapped the screen, and glowing symbols appeared, lines of alien writing that Ethan couldn't read. "This is her contract," the leader said. "Signed in her blood, she is bound to her breeding duties." Lyra's voice shook, but her words were sharp. It was forced. "That contract means nothing." The leader's helmet tilted slightly, almost mocking. "Your voice is worth nothing. The law is the law." Ethan's pulse pounded in his ears. What kind of law calls a living person property? The leader's tone didn't change. The kind that keeps order. Ethan took one step forward. "Not in my house, it doesn't." The alien's hand moved toward the weapon on his hip. For a moment, Ethan thought it was over. But then, Lyra moved. She stepped around Ethan, her blanket sliding to the floor. Her glowing eyes locked on the leader. She spoke in that same strange language she had used the night before, her voice quick and sharp like a blade. The leader's body went rigid. The two others shifted uneasily, exchanging looks. She kept speaking, her words rising and falling with an authority that didn't match her desperate state. Finally, the leader raised a hand, signaling the others to stop. He took one slow step back toward the door. "We will leave, for now," he said. "But know this, our patience is short." The three of them stepped outside into the snow. The mechanical hum started again, fading into the distance until all that remained was the soft hiss of the wind. Ethan shut the door hard, locking it twice. He turned to her. "What did you say to them?" Her eyes met his, but her voice was quiet. Something they feared hearing. But it will not hold them off for long. Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to push the tension from his chest. "Then we need to be ready when they come back." She looked at him for a long time, as if deciding something. "If you stand with me, you will be hunted too." He didn't look away. "Maybe, but I'm not letting them take you." She blinked, as if she didn't believe him at first. Then, slowly, a faint warmth came into her expression, something almost like hope. Outside, the snow continued to fall, quiet and endless. But inside, the air was heavy with the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The next time the aliens came, there would be no talking. The fire burned low, casting long shadows on the walls. Ethan sat at the table, oiling his rifle in silence. Across from him, Lyra sipped from a cup, her glowing eyes following his every movement. The cabin was quiet, except for the soft crackle of wood. But beneath the calm, both of them felt the weight of what had just happened. "They will come again," she said softly, breaking the silence. "I know," Ethan replied without looking up. "They won't ask next time. They'll just take me." Ethan set the rifle down and met her gaze. "Then we don't let them." Her lips pressed together as if she wanted to argue, but instead she stood and walked to the window. Snow was falling again, heavy and slow. "You don't understand who they are," she murmured. "The men who came today are only hunters. If they return, it will be with soldiers." "Then we prepare," Ethan said, standing up. "Tell me exactly what they want you for." She didn't turn around. "For breeding." The word hung in the air like ice. Ethan clenched his fists. Lyra finally looked back at him. "On my world, powerful families breed like livestock. I was matched to a man I never met. My value is in my ability to carry his bloodline. I ran before the first night." Ethan stepped closer. "And that's when they started hunting you." She nodded. "When I refused, I became property that had to be recovered." Ethan rubbed his jaw. "And the contract they showed me?" "It's real," she admitted. "Signed with my blood. They can prove ownership by law in half the galaxy." The words made him sick, but his voice stayed steady. "Then maybe we give them something else instead of you." She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" "Supplies. Weapons. Whatever makes them leave." She shook her head. "You can't trade with them. To them, a human's word means nothing." Before Ethan could reply, a sharp sound came from outside, the crunch of boots on snow. Both of them froze. Lyra moved to the corner, clutching the blanket. Ethan grabbed his rifle and stepped to the window. 3 shadows moved between the trees, closer than before. The leader's tall frame was easy to spot. They weren't hiding this time. The knock came, harder than ever, shaking the door on its hinges. Ethan stepped forward and opened it a few inches, his rifle raised. The leader stood there, his visor glowing faint red in the snowy light. "We have decided to be generous," he said. "Give us the female now, and we will not harm you." "She's not yours," Ethan replied coldly. The leader tilted his head. "Do you think you can keep her? Do you think you can fight us?" Ethan's grip tightened on the rifle. "If I have to." A low laugh came from the alien. He reached to his belt and pulled out a flat metal device, pressing it so a holographic image appeared in the air. It was the same glowing contract he had covered in alien symbols. The leader pointed to a red mark in the corner. "Signed in her blood, it binds her life to her mates. You have no claim to her." From behind Ethan, Lyra's voice cut in sharply. "It was signed under force. That makes it void." The leader turned his visor toward her. "Not under our law." The 2 aliens behind him stepped forward, their armored boots crunching in the snow. One's hand hovered near his weapon. Ethan could feel the tension building, like the moment before a storm breaks. "If your law says she's property, then your law is wrong," he said. The leader's tone hardened. "Careful, human. We are patient, but not infinite." Ethan took a step forward, his rifle still aimed. Then take my offer, supplies in exchange for leaving. The leader paused, then let out a sound that might have been laughter. You would trade metal and food for a living prize? You really are a primitive creature. Ethan's muscles tensed, ready for a fight. But then, Lyra stepped forward from behind him, her blanket falling away. She moved until she stood beside him, her glowing eyes locked on the leader's visor. When she spoke, it was in their language, fast, sharp, and full of venom. The leader froze mid-step. His two companions exchanged uneasy glances. Whatever she was saying made them hesitate. She took another step forward, her tone dropping to a cold, steady threat. The leader's head tilted, then lowered slightly, as if acknowledging something he didn't want to admit. Finally, he stepped back. "We will return," he said, his voice low. "And when we do, there will be no talking." Without another word, the three of them turned and walked into the snow, their dark shapes fading between the trees until they were gone. Ethan shut the door quickly and locked it. He turned to Lyra, his voice tight. "What did you say?" She didn't answer at first. She walked to the fire, sat down, and pulled the blanket back over her shoulders. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but firm. I reminded him of the old codes. There are things even they fear breaking, but the codes only delay them. They will still come. Ethan sat across from her. Then we use that time. We get ready for them. She looked into the fire, her face unrateable. "If you help me, you'll make enemies you can't imagine." He met her gaze without hesitation. "Then I guess I'll need to imagine them fast." Outside, the snow fell heavier, covering the tracks of the visitors, as if trying to erase what had just happened. But both of them knew it wouldn't erase the danger. The next time the knock came, it wouldn't be a warning. It would be war. The night passed without another visit, but sleep did not come easily. Ethan kept his rifle close, checking the door locks twice before sitting in the armchair. Lyra stayed near the fire, her eyes open, staring into the flames as though she could see something far away. The wind outside howled like a warning neither of them could ignore. By morning, the storm had eased. The snow outside lay smooth and untouched, a clean white blanket over the land. Ethan brewed tea and set a cup in front of Lyra. She took it with quiet hands, the steam curling into her face. For a moment, it almost felt normal, as if she was just another guest in his cabin. But the weight in the air reminded him that their peace was borrowed time. "You need to tell me everything," he said finally. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the cup. "You'll think I'm lying." "Try me," he said, her eyes met his. "The man they want to take me back to is a ruler, not of one city, not even of one world, but of 7. I was to be his breeding partner, chosen for my bloodline's purity. My children would be his heirs." Ethan frowned. "And you ran." "I ran before the first night," she said quietly. "The punishment for that is death. But to avoid scandal, they send hunters instead of soldiers. They bring back runaways quietly, if possible." He leaned back. "And if it's not possible? They kill everyone who helped her." The words sank deep. Ethan didn't flinch, but he felt the cold settle in his chest. Lyra looked down. "You should have thrown me out when I came to your door." He didn't answer that. Instead, he stood and began checking the cabin again, windows, door frames, shutters, making sure every latch was tight. "If I was going to throw you out, I would have done it already." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind outside. Then Ethan noticed something odd. The rug near the back corner of the cabin had shifted slightly, as if moved during the night. He pulled it back and saw faint scuff marks on the wooden floor. He turned sharply toward Lyra. Why was this moved? Her eyes flickered toward the spot and then away. I was looking for something." He narrowed his eyes. "What?" She hesitated before answering. "A place to hide the beacon." His voice hardened. "What beacon?" She reached into the folds of her blanket and pulled out a small, round device, no larger than his palm. "If you had been killed protecting me, I could have sent for help." Ethan stepped forward, taking the device from her hand. It was smooth and metallic, with a single blue light glowing in the center. "Help from who?" She shook her head. "Not who. What? There are still some like me who believe no one should be owned. They would have come." He turned the device over, feeling its weight. "And if your hunters detected this signal, they would have known my location immediately." Ethan's jaw clenched. "You were ready to risk bringing them here." Her voice rose, trembling with frustration. I was ready to risk anything if it meant you wouldn't die for me. Silence filled the room. The only sound was the low crackle of the fire. Finally, Ethan set the beacon on the table. If you're staying here, you follow my rules. No signals, no hiding things from me. She lowered her eyes. I understand. He took a breath, trying to ease the tension from his shoulders. Good, because next time they come, we won't have time to argue. Hours passed quietly after that. Ethan repaired a broken window latch while Lyra cooked. She moved with practiced skill, slicing vegetables, stirring the pot, adding spices that gave the air a warm, rich smell. He caught himself watching her more than once, wondering how someone with her talents ended up in such a dangerous life. By evening, the snow outside glowed under the pale light of the moon. The storm had fully passed, leaving the world so still that every small sound felt louder. Ethan sat cleaning his rifle again when Lyra suddenly froze in the middle of the room. What is it? He asked. She raised a hand, signaling for silence. Her eyes went to the window. Ethan listened. At first, he heard nothing. Then, soft crunches in the snow. Multiple sets of footsteps, slow and careful, moving closer. He stood, motioning for her to move behind the table. She obeyed, clutching the blanket around her. The sound grew clearer. Whoever it was, they were circling the cabin. A faint metallic click echoed from the back wall, like someone checking a weapon. Ethan's pulse quickened. He moved to the back window and peered out. Shapes moved in the shadows, tall and broad. The same hunters. One of them stepped into the moonlight, his armor glinting. He looked directly at the window, as if he could see Ethan watching. Ethan ducked back. They're here. Lyra's voice was barely above a whisper. We can't fight them. Not yet. We don't have a choice, he said, loading fresh rounds into his rifle. The footsteps stopped. For a moment, everything went still again. Then, 3 heavy bangs on the front door. The leader's voice called out, colder than before. Last chance, human. Give her to us and live. Refuse and die with her. Ethan looked at Lyra. Her eyes were wide, fear and defiance battling in her gaze. He turned back toward the door, his voice steady. Then I guess I'm dying tonight. A pause. Then the sound of weapons being drawn outside. Lyra's hand clutched the edge of the table. Ethan, she whispered. He didn't take his eyes off the door. Stay low. The air felt heavy, the silence pressing in from all sides. The hunters were here, and this time they weren't leaving without blood. The banging on the door stopped, replaced by the sound of boots crunching in the snow as the hunters spread out. Ethan could hear them moving to both sides of the cabin, their heavy steps slow and deliberate. The fire crackled softly, but the air felt colder, as if the warmth couldn't fight off what was coming. He moved to the window, peeking out just in time to see one of them kneeling in the snow, setting up some kind of device. It glowed faint red and began to hum. The sound low but sharp enough to make his skin crawl. Lyra's eyes widened when she saw it. Plasma breacher, she whispered. They're going to burn through the walls. Ethan didn't waste time. He grabbed the shotgun from above the fireplace and tossed it to her. You know how to use this? She nodded once, her hands steady, even though her breathing was fast. He moved quickly, closing the shutters and sliding heavy wooden beams into place over the windows. Every sound outside grew louder. The scrape of metal on wood, the crunch of snow, the faint clicks of weapons being prepared. Then came a sudden flash from the side of the cabin, followed by a burst of heat. A small section of the wall glowed orange, the wood beginning to smolder. Lyra raised the shotgun, but Ethan shook his head. Not yet. The humming grew louder. Another spot on the opposite wall began to burn. They were trying to force them into a corner. Ethan's heart pounded as he thought through their options. We can't stay here. They'll box us in. Lyra's voice was low but urgent. There's a hatch under the floor. Storage space. If we can reach it without them seeing, we might slip out the back. Before he could answer, a sharp explosion rocked the cabin. A panel of wood shattered inward, scattering splinters across the floor. The wind roared in through the gap, carrying snow and the sound of heavy boots. Now! Ethan yelled. They moved quickly, Ethan firing a shot toward the hole to force the hunters back. The blast echoed in the small space, smoke curling toward the ceiling. Lyra dropped to her knees, pulling aside a rug near the table. Beneath it was a small hatch, its metal handle cold to the touch. Ethan covered her while she yanked it open. The space below was narrow and dark, filled with crates and old tools. Lyra climbed down first, holding the shotgun close to her chest. Ethan followed, pulling the hatch shut above them, just as another blast shook the cabin. In the darkness, their breath sounded loud. Dust floated in the thin beams of light coming through the floorboards. Ethan crouched low, listening to the muffled thumps of boots above them. Voices in an alien language barked orders. Lyra whispered, "They'll find the hatch." "Not if we move now," Ethan said. He led the way to the far end of the crawl space, where a small door opened out to the back of the cabin. The snow outside glowed faintly under the moonlight. They stepped out quietly, crouching low. The cold hit them instantly, sharp and biting. Ethan scanned the area. The hunters were focused on breaking into the cabin, their backs turned. For a moment, it looked like they might actually slip away unseen. Then a shout rang out, a guttural alien cry. One of them had spotted movement. Ethan grabbed Lyra's arm. "Run!" They sprinted across the snow, their boots sinking deep. Plasma shots hissed past them, melting holes in the snow where they landed. The trees ahead offered some cover, their dark trunks breaking up the moonlight. They dove behind a fallen log, breathing hard. Snow clung to their clothes, melting against their skin. "They won't stop," Lyra panted. "They'll track us all night." Ethan looked at her, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Then we make it a fight." Before she could reply, the sound of engines roared through the forest. Harsh lights cut through the trees as the hunters activated search drones. Small, floating machines zipped between the trunks, scanning the snow for heat signatures. Ethan pulled Lyra closer against the log, trying to keep their bodies hidden from the drone's sensors. The hum of its engine grew louder, passing just a few meters away before fading again. "We can't stay here," Ethan whispered. "They'll sweep the whole forest." He scanned the darkness and spotted a faint trail leading toward a frozen stream. "Water will hide our heat," he said. Lyra nodded, and they moved quickly, keeping low. The icy crust of the stream cracked under their boots as they stepped into it, the freezing water soaking through their shoes instantly. The cold stabbed at their feet, but it masked their tracks. They followed the stream for what felt like forever. The sound of the drones fading behind them. But just when Ethan thought they might have lost them, a loud crack split the night. A branch snapped under heavy weight nearby. Lyra's hand gripped his sleeve. "They're close." Through the trees, the faint red glow of the hunters' visors appeared again. Ethan knew they couldn't outrun them in the snow. He pulled Lyra behind a thick cluster of rocks and readied his rifle. "If they find us here, we hold them off." The glow grew brighter, footsteps crunching closer. Snow fell silently from the branches overhead. Lyra's breath came in quick clouds. Then the first hunter stepped into view, his weapon raised. Ethan fired. The blast echoed like thunder, sending the hunter stumbling back into the snow. The others shouted, rushing forward. Plasma bolts lit up the night, striking the rocks and hissing into the snow. Lyra leaned out, firing the shotgun. One of the drones shattered in midair, its burning pieces falling into the snow. But there were too many of them. The hunters closed in, their weapons glowing brighter. A plasma shot struck the rock beside Ethan, showering him with sparks. He looked at Lyra. "If I tell you to run, you run." Her voice was sharp. "I'm not leaving you." Another blast shook the ground, and the night filled with the sound of battle. The hunters were here, and escape was slipping away with every second. The cold bit at their skin as the fight raged in the snow. Plasma blasts lit the dark forest in flashes of red and blue, hissing when they struck the ground. Ethan fired again, the recoil punching into his shoulder. One of the hunters went down, his armor smoking, but two more charged forward. Their heavy boots crunched the snow with each step, their weapons glowing hotter. Lyra stayed low, firing the shotgun whenever she saw movement. The blasts were loud and close, making the trees shake with echoes. But the hunters were trained, moving in a wide arc to surround them. Every second, the space to escape grew smaller. A plasma bolt skimmed past Ethan's arm, the heat burning through his sleeve. He hissed in pain, but didn't stop firing. "Keep them back!" he shouted. One of the hunters rushed straight at their cover, a huge figure in dark armor. Lyra turned the shotgun on him and fired, the shot knocking him back into the snow. But his armor took most of the hit. He groaned, staggered, then kept coming. Ethan didn't hesitate. He leapt over the log, slamming into the hunter with all his weight. They crashed into the snow, weapons clattering away. The alien was strong, his clawed hands grabbing for Ethan's throat. Ethan fought back, punching hard into the visor, cracking it. A distorted growl came from inside the helmet. The hunter shoved him off, but before he could get up, Lyra stepped forward. Her eyes glowed brighter than he'd ever seen, and for the first time, the air around her shimmered with cold. She placed her hand on the hunter's chest plate. Frost spread instantly over the armor, creeping up to the visor. The alien froze mid-movement, his breath turning into a cloud of ice crystals. Ethan stared, his breath fogging in the air. What was that? Lyra didn't answer. She turned to the others, her hands glowing faint blue now. When the next hunter raised his weapon, she sent a wave of icy wind toward him. The plasma blast died in the air, frozen before it reached them. The hunter stumbled back, frost climbing over his arms and legs. The last one hesitated, his visor turning toward Ethan, then Lyra. For the first time, the hunters looked unsure. Ethan grabbed his rifle and aimed. "Leave," he growled. The leader's voice came, low and tense. "This changes nothing. We will come again." But he still backed away, dragging his frozen comrade with him. The other limped after them, disappearing into the trees. The hum of their retreat faded until only the sound of the wind remained. Ethan lowered his rifle slowly, his chest rising and falling with deep breaths. Snowflakes landed on his face, melting instantly. He turned to Lyra. "You could have done that before?" She shook her head, her voice quiet. "It's dangerous. I can't always control it. If I lose focus, I could freeze everything, even you." He stepped closer. "Oh, you just saved my life." Her gaze dropped to the ground. "You saved mine first." They stood in the snow, surrounded by the quiet aftermath of the fight. The forest was still again, but the tracks and scorch marks told the story of what had happened. Ethan finally broke the silence. "We can't stay here. They'll regroup and come back stronger." Lyra nodded. "I know a place, far from the trade routes, hidden in the mountains, but the journey will be hard." He gave a small, tired smile. "Hard is fine. We've done hard already." They began moving through the forest, following the frozen stream. The moonlight reflected off the ice, casting a silver glow on the trees. Lyra walked beside him, still holding the shotgun. Her steps were lighter now, but her eyes kept scanning the shadows. After a while, she spoke. "Back on my homeworld, no one fights for someone like me. If you're weak, you're forgotten. You're the first person who ever stood in the way." Ethan glanced at her. Maybe it's time someone did. She gave him a look that was almost a smile, but there was still sadness in her eyes. "If they catch us, they'll kill you before they take me." He adjusted the strap of his rifle. "Then we make sure they never catch us." They walked for hours, the snow crunching under their boots. When they finally stopped to rest beneath a rocky overhang, Lyra built a small fire. The flames flickered against the stone, and for a moment, it felt almost safe. Ethan sat across from her, watching her hands as she worked. She moved like someone used to survival, each motion efficient, no wasted effort. When the fire was steady, she looked at him and said, "You could still leave me here. Go back to your life. Pretend you never met me." He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "And spend the rest of my life wondering if you made it? Not a chance." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since they met, she let the blanket fall from her shoulders, letting the firelight warm her skin. "Then you're stuck with me." Ethan gave a faint smirk. "I've had worse company." The fire popped, sending a few sparks into the air. Outside, the wind had quieted, and snow fell gently, covering the signs of their fight. Somewhere out there, the hunters would be regrouping, preparing for their next attempt. But here, under the shelter of the rocks, there was a moment of peace. Ethan leaned back, closing his eyes for the first time in what felt like days. Lyra's voice came softly through the crackle of the fire. "Ethan? Yeah? If we survive this, I'll make you the best meal you've ever had. And maybe children too, if you want." He opened one eye, a faint smile pulling at his lips. "One step at a time." She smiled back, but her gaze drifted to the dark forest beyond the firelight. She knew this wasn't over. And so did he. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faint sound of movement. Slow, deliberate, far away, but getting closer. The fight for her freedom had only begun.